Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. My name is Cleo Duke Wright, and I'm the owner of Cole Books in Hartford at 677 Blue Hills Avenue. And that's an invitation to come and visit us and browse around. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about George Herman. And he was a beloved athlete and a bad boy. And he wrote this himself. And it's entitled, "The Kids Can't Take It If We Don't Give It." You hear that? The kids can't take it if we don't give it. By George Herman. And what we know him by the name of Babe Ruth. We should not assume that disciplined faith springs from the heart of its own accord. We do not necessarily find such faith on our own. Baseball great Babe Ruth reminds us that, like other virtues, it must be transmitted to the young by caring adults. Bad boy Ruth. That was me. Don't get the idea that I'm proud of my harum-scarum youth. I'm not. I simply had a rotten start in life, and it took me a long time to get my bearings. Looking back on my youth, I honestly don't think I knew the difference between right and wrong. I spent much of my early boyhood living over my father's saloon in Baltimore. And when I wasn't living over it, I was in it, soaking up the atmosphere. I hardly knew my parents. St. Mary's Industrial School in Baltimore, where I was finally taken, had been called an orphanage and a reform school. It was, in fact, a training school for orphans, incorrigible, delinquents, and runaways picked up on the street of the city. I was listed as an incorrigible. I guess I was. Perhaps I would always have been, but for Brother Matthias, the greatest man I have ever known, and for the religious training I received there, which has since been so important to me. I doubt if any appeal could have straightened me out except a power over and above man, the appeal of God. Iron rod discipline couldn't have done it, nor all the punishment and reward systems that could have been devised. God had an eye out for me just as he has for you, and he was pulling for me to make the grade. As I look back now, I realize that knowledge of God was a big crossroads for me. I got one thing straight, and I wish all kids did, that God was boss. He was not only my boss, but boss of all my bosses up till now. Like all bad kids, I hated most of the people who had control over me and couldn't punish me. I began to see that I had a higher person to reckon with, who never changed. Whereas my earthly authorities changed from year to year, those who bossed me had the same self-battles. They, like me, had to account to God. I also realized that God was not only just, but merciful. He knew we were weak and that we all find it easier to be stinkers than good sons of God, not only as kids, but all through our lives. That clear picture, I'm sure, would be important to any kid who hates a teacher or resents a person in charge. This picture of my relationship to man and God was what helped relieve me of bitterness, rancor, and a desire to get even. I've seen a great number of He-Men in my baseball career, but never one equal to Brother Matthias. He stood 6'6" and weighed 250 pounds. It was all muscle. He could have been successful at anything he wanted in life, and he chose the church. It was he who introduced me to baseball. Very early, he noticed that I had some natural talent for throwing and catching. He used to back me in a corner of the big yard at St. Mary's and bunt a ball to me by the hours, correcting the mistakes I had made with my hands and feet. I never forgot the first time I saw him hit a ball. The baseball in 1902 was a lump of mush, but Brother Matthias would stand at the end of the yard, throw the ball up with his left hand, and give it a terrific belt with the bat he held in his right hand. The ball would carry 350 feet, a tremendous knock in these days. I would watch him bug-eyed. Thanks to Brother Matthias, I was able to leave St. Mary's in 1914 and began my professional career with the famous Baltimore Orioles, at that time a minor league team. Out on my own, free from the rigid rules of a religious school, boy, did it go to my head. I began really to cut up. Well, let's see what Babe's gonna do now that he's on his own, with no one to tell him what to do, when to get up, when to go down, when to go to sleep, when to do this, when to do that. We all get that chance when we see what we're all made of, when we're out on our own. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Hello, I'm J. Stan McCauley, and I'm exploring a run for mayor of the city of Hartford in the 2019 election. It's undeniable that Hartford has many challenges. However, I believe that our residents are our strength. The question is, do you believe, like I do, in the potential of Hartford? You see the many assets the city has, but do you wonder, as I do, why we are still struggling to move ahead? Do you wonder why the solutions being offered to us just don't seem to get the job done? Well, creating a vibrant city begins with you. We have incredible people who live in the city, who have great solutions to Hartford's biggest challenges. But you don't always have a platform to have your ideas heard, let alone given an opportunity to co-create solutions that work for you, that work for us, that work for Hartford. Hartford's journey will be bumpy, and we'll continue to face highs and lows that challenge us to work smarter and come together as a community that is willing to capitalize on the power of our collective diversity of thought. The challenges facing Hartford will require each of us to act, whether in small ways or big ones. If you're with us on this journey, give me a call at 860-944-9797 and host a listening event for me. Invite a few of your friends so we can explore the possibilities together for a better Hartford.
Okay, we're back with Babe Ruth. He's out on his own. And here's the rest of his story. He strayed from the church, but don't think I forgot my religious training. I just overlooked it. I prayed often and hard, but like many incorrigible young fellows, the swift tempo of my living shoved religion into the background. What good was all the hard work and ceaseless interest of the brother? People would argue, you can't make kids religious, they say, because it just won't take. Send kids to Sunday school and they too often end up hating it and the church. Don't you believe it? Don't you believe it? As far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as most kids go, once religion sinks in, it stays there. Deep down, the lads who get religious training get it where it counts, in the roots. They may fail it, but it never fails them. When the score is against them, or they get a bump pitch, that unfailing something inside will be there to draw them on. I've seen it with kids. I know from the letters they write me. The more I think of it, the more important I feel it is to give kids the works. As far as religion is concerned, they'll never want to be holy. They'll act like tough monkeys in contrast, but somewhere inside will be a solid little chapel. It may get dusty from neglect, but the time will come when the door will be opened with much relief. But the kids can't take it if we don't give it to them. I'll say that again. But the kids can't take it if we don't give it to them. I've been criticized as often as I'm praised for my activities with kids on the grounds that what I did was for publicity. Well, criticism doesn't matter. I never forgot where I came from. Every dirty-faced kid I see is another useful citizen. No one knew better than I what it meant not to have your own home, a backyard, and your own kitchen and icebox. That's why all through the years, even when the big money was rolling in, I'd never forget St. Mary's brother Matthias and the boys I left behind. I kept going back. As I look back, those moments when I let the kids down, they were my worst. I guess I was so anxious to enjoy life to the fullest that I forgot the rules or ignored them. Once in a while, you can get away. Once in a while, you can get away with it, but not for long. When I broke training, the efforts were felt by myself and by the ball team and even my fans. While I drifted away from the church, I did have my own altar, a big window of my New York apartment overlooking the city lights. Often I would kneel before that window and say my prayers. I would feel quite humble then. I'd ask God to help me not make such a big fool of myself and pray that I'd measure up to what He expected of me. In December 1946, I was in a French hospital, New York, facing a serious operation. Paul Carey, one of my oldest and closest friends, was by my bed one night. "They're going to operate in the morning, babe," Paul said. "Don't you think you ought to put your house in order?" I didn't dodge the long, challenging look in his eyes. I knew what he meant. For the first time, I realized that death might strike me out. I nodded and Paul got up, called in the chapel, and I made a full confession. I'll return in the morning and give you Holy Communion," the chaplain said, "but you don't have to fast." "I'll fast," I said. I didn't have even a drop of water. As I lay in bed that evening, I thought to myself, what a comforting feeling to be free from fear and worry. I now could simply turn them over to God. Later on, my wife brought in a letter from a little kid in New Jersey. "Dear babe," he wrote, "everybody in the 7th grade class is pulling and praying for you. I am enclosing a medal which, if you wear, will make you better. Your pal, Mike Quinlan. P.S. I know this will be your 61st homer. You'll hit it. I asked them to pin the miraculous medal to my pajama coat. I've worn the medal constantly ever since. I'll wear it to my grave." And I think this was a time when he promised a little boy to hit it out of the park. And he pointed. We saw this movie when I was young. He pointed to where he was going to hit it, and he hit that ball right out of the park. That's Babe Ruth's story. Not about his whole life, but about his hard beginnings and his hard times. And thanks to Brother Matthias, he found relief. He found freedom. He found God. And right now we're going to go right back to a commercial, and we'll be right back to close us out. See you in a moment. Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner, and we just told a story, or a short story about Babe Ruth, and a story that he wrote himself about himself. And I like the story because there's something in here that says it didn't matter how much you disciplined him or yelled or whatever you did, he still was the same. Believe me, I know that's true. I had an uncle like that who just passed away. It did not matter who disciplined him. The school, they even sent him to divorce school. We always thought it was a military school. But they sent him, we took him to the military school. We just learned today that, not today, but at the funeral, that it was a reform school. We didn't know that. Well, it didn't matter. He still didn't change. Not kind of like Babe Ruth, not a bad fella. Just march to his own drum. There's so many of us like that. And if we don't teach them, if we don't teach our children, they won't know. Even if you think they're not listening, teach them anyway. Because as Babe Ruth says, deep down in the roots, it may get dusty, but it's still there. And one day they'll dust it off. And they'll use what you have taught them. But if you don't teach them anything, and you're just discouraging and not around, they won't learn it. They'll have to find a Brother Matthias or someone else. Pray that they find someone to teach them how to live and how to be productive citizens and how to have faith and not to always be negative. We live in a very negative world now. And I often say when I'm around negative people, I often say, oh no, this person can't bring me down. And when I feel myself coming down, you have to go, you have to separate yourself for a while because you don't want to become a negative person also. And there's some people who are always, always, always negative. A little child had faith in Babe Ruth. A country. You need to read the story of Babe Ruth. I hope you can maybe get a copy from the library. I don't have any copies in the bookstore, but I sure will get you one if you want one. Of Babe Ruth's life and what he went through. And even in his last days, the faith that he kept, the faith that he knew there was a power higher than him, and he had no fear. He had faith and trust in God. Wow, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? So it doesn't matter if they're not listening. One little girl said to me, when I was trying to tell her about God, she said, I'm just not a God person. That's just not my thing. And she did the whole head thing and the finger thing. That is just not my thing. Well, I wanted to, I was a little upset with her, but I did not say anything. I said, yeah, but I'll tell you about it anyway. Maybe someday you get interested in it. We have to be patient with those who don't listen, because you don't know if they're listening or not, or what they're catching or what they don't catch. Just trust God. Just keep on keeping on. And now, that's our time for this week. I'm glad you came and shared this time with me. I just want you to, the book that I got that from was The Book of Virtue, The Book of Virtues by William J. Bennett. It's an old book, and I got it secondhand many, many years ago. Every once in a while, I go through it. So now, remember, we'll come back next week. Remember, read a little, write a little, dream big, and I will see you next week.